Good morning and welcome to the Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of Thursday, December the 15th, 2022, the last Electoral Area Services Committee of the year. I'd like to acknowledge that the Sunshine Coast Regional District is within the territories of the Sechelt and Squamish First Nations. We have an agenda in front of us. Do I see anyone enthusiastic to move the agenda? Moved, seconded, all in favor? Great, we're ready to go. I'm also going to ask for a motion to receive all reports and communications. Moved, seconded, all those in favor? And we're done. Okay, the first thing up is a delegation this morning, and I'm going to go to GM Gagnon for an introduction.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. I started to write an introduction to this report last night, but in the end, I decided that the two reports, both the October 13th report, as well as the lengthy report that sits in front of you today, outlines the history of the Coopers Green Hall replacement project, the recent challenges that have arisen on the originally proposed site, and the crossroads that we find ourselves at today. So I don't really have a formal introduction. That being said, I would like to take this opportunity to share with the committee some recent information that we have learned since the report was written. There was a concern surfaced about the possible covenant on the Connor Park land that would prohibit the construction of a community hall. Staff have checked the land title and can confirm that while a covenant does exist on the two parcels adjacent, which are known as Welcome Woods, the covenant is not on the Connor Park parcel. However, during this research, we did discover that while SCRD zoning permits the construction of a hall at Connor Park, agricultural land commission approvals will also be necessary. So this needs to be included in the list of challenges on the Connor Park site, and we'll make that correction on any communication that goes forward if that is supported to proceed. Today we have a delegation from the Half Moon Bay Community Association that will share their thoughts on the staff report and the situation to date, after which point staff are happy to answer any questions that the committee might have. And so with that, I would introduce Andy Cox-Jones and Linda McMahon from the Half Moon Bay Community Association to present their introduction. Thank you.
Thank you. Please come up.
Okay, are we visible and audible? Thank you. First, I'd like to ask, has everybody been given a copy of this piece of paper? All right, thank you. And so, thank you very much for allowing us to present this morning. The piece of paper that you have in front of you, I apologize for it being late arriving. We only got the report last Friday. Late, and to marshal our members and get to this response has taken a few days. So we only got there last night with a final copy, which Justine received. But I'm sorry, you've been the last to see it. So I'll jump right in. As an introduction, I'd like to say that we, as a community association, are committed to helping the SCRD to complete this project. We have always recognized that the hall's location is a problematic, it's a divisive issue within our community, and it's quite harmful to what we want to do, which is community building, because we have two sets of opinions. It's important to us, and we want to make sure that you have the opportunity to consider the options properly. Make sure that they're presented for public consumption properly, and then, and only then, can the right decision be made. We are concerned that the staff report has some shortcomings in it. More specifically, it doesn't present the options the way we would like them to be presented, and it's lacking some information which make a lot of difference. For the last quite a few years, the Community Association, the board members, and our membership representing the community have patiently supported, encouraged, fundraised, and most recently negotiated to operate a hall, which we have always understood would be at Cooper's Green. This was concluded through public consultation, which was done in a thorough fashion in 2017, that concluded the hall would be at Cooper's Green. And the way we have conducted ourselves has been directed by a memorandum of understanding between us and the SCRD for the last several years. Again, which understands and expects that the hall would be at Cooper's Green. Now, we don't discount the possibility that for monetary or technical reasons, it may not be possible to site the hall at Cooper's Green, and Connor Park may therefore have to be the only eventual option. But we don't think we are at that stage by any means yet. We're concerned that the staff report presents the options in a way that biases the decision towards Connor Park in a way which is just not reasonable. So the first question I have, and I would ask you to look to the staff for the information and answer the questions that we are posing today. They're in several sections. The first one is to do with the site at the lower park, the original site, or as some folks have suggested, at a site which is further from the ocean wall, but is still in the lower park, but it might be subject to less intrusion from run-up and wave action than does the option on the original site. The decision to start working on the Cooper's Green original site was a very serious one. And we don't believe that the underlying reason for the decision has been properly explained to us or to our community, even though we've asked for it several times. And I don't want to go into a huge amount of detail, but in 2018, Western Geotechnical, who was the consultant at the time, submitted a report with multiple different issues that it dealt with, but the key one, which has got us to this stop right now, is that the floor level for a new hall would have to be 7 feet approximately above the level of the existing hall. And just, that's there. I can just touch the eaves of the old building. That's where the new hall would have to be. Immediately subsequent to that, I don't have a date, the consultant was asked if that was the final word, and they came back with a signed and official correspondence which said that because, as I understand anyway, because of local conditions, we don't have major storms, we don't have storm surge there like we do in some parts of the Salish Sea, and also because the building is not a habitable building to which certain things apply. In actual fact, his opinion was that the floor level would need to be 2 feet above, not 7 feet. That was the situation in 2017. 2022, the same consultant working for a different company was asked the same question again. He came back and he said, once again, 7 feet was the requirement. But we don't understand why the same question wasn't asked back to him to say, okay, so is there a difference? And as far as we know, the local conditions have not changed. It's the same park next to the same sea, and it's not a habitable building. So we don't understand why that consultant has not been asked. We've been told that he can't be asked his opinion unless he's under contract, and I don't believe that's actually true. In the report, he actually invites further discussion if the SCRD would like any more information from him, and as far as I know, it hasn't happened. So if we are to abandon this site finally, the lower part of the park, would the SCRD make a clear, credible public statement which people in Half Moon Bay can understand? If that's the case, and it cannot be built on the lower park, then say so and tell us clearly why, and now we can honestly think about only the other possible sites. But without that, we leave this lingering doubt and confusion and frustration amongst our community members. The next thing I'd like to mention is what we've called Option D. Now, that's probably a term that you haven't heard. In the staff report in October, there were 3 options, and subsequent to that, and when the board deferred the decision, we had some further discussions with the staff, and option D was what we came up with as something which to ask our community. We said, if there isn't a suitable site at Cooper's Green, in that instance, would the community be interested to build the hall at Connor Park, but also to make some improvements to Cooper's Green Park, in particular to build a performance space at Cooper's Green Park? And by illustration, we posted for people a photograph of the Hackett Park performance stage. And we said, not like that necessarily, but something of that scale and that function. Would you be happy with that as option D? And we asked people to tell us what they thought. And what we got was 70-odd responses, and a majority said yes, they thought that option D would be quite satisfactory. And we got a lot of comments about that, with a lot of questions, but the majority said yes to option D. A significant minority were vehemently opposed, as many people have continued to be. What we understand very well from talking to a lot of people, they were excited about this possible option D because of the fact that it seemed to serve both parts of our somewhat divided community. So that was the impetus for some interest. What we're concerned about is that what is being offered as options for you in this report today is a hall at Cooper's Green or a hall at Connor Park. That's all. There's some mention there, if there happens to be a surplus, then maybe sometime in the future the project could request the funding to be the surplus to be directed. But honestly, there's not the trust to suggest that people would believe that. And what might happen if the call goes to Connor Park and there is no other commitment, then we might end up with the old hall at Cooper's Green demolished, nothing there in the park except 2 or 3 porta potties, and that's all. And that, to us, is not a suitable option to Cooper's Green Hall. So we would ask you to request the staff to change the options so that they are option D or Connor Park, as opposed to Cooper's Green Hall or Connor Park Hall. Next item I'd like to mention are the pros and cons. There's some narrative in the report, and there's also a table of pros and cons. What we see in that is, and again, I'd like to repeat that if there's truly no viable option in Cooper's Green, then option D is what should be offered. But we want to make sure that the 2 options of a hall, 2 locations for the hall, are evaluated with a fair and unbiased set of pros and cons, and we don't believe that they are. The details are here. I won't go into a huge amount of detail. There's been no site evaluation at Connor Park. However, when we look at the little map extract for Connor Park, the red rectangle, which is the side of the hall, there's a little spot in the middle, which if you go there, it's actually I don't know, maybe tell us, but it's a ginormous cell communication tower, like 50, 60 feet high. It's not mentioned, but the existence of a hydro line at Cooper's Green is mentioned. It kind of suggests that the community is being pushed to see Connor Park in a better light than Cooper's Green. I think there's a concern that Connor Park is not a destination. I think if you ask people along the coast, do you know about Cooper's Green? Yes, they know where it is. They know how to get there. They know there's a bus that you can get there. Connor Park, I think most people would say, where? So it's not a well-known location, and it's also much closer to Seashelt, which suggests that it might compete with Seashelt venues when it comes to people's willingness to hold events at that place. These are downsides which we see for Connor Park, which we feel should be expressed. There's more things about provision of services, because the The upper knoll, Cooper's Green site, is built on bedrock. It doesn't mention the fact that it's cheap to build on bedrock, where we don't know how deep the foundations would have to be at Connor Park because there's been no evaluation there. There's also some talk about wastewater, which would have to be routed across the lagoon to a new septic field in the lower park. This is at Cooper's Green. And as far as I can tell, we have a septic field in Cooper's Green now, but we also have porta potties there, and for years and years, as long as I remember, every year a truck comes along there and pumps out, so there's this ongoing contract. Well, if that's the case, we could just as easily put wastewater in a holding tank and have it pumped out from a new hole, save the environmental challenge and the capital cost for a small operational cost. So again, these are the things which we feel are not fairly represented between the two sites, and we just want a balanced evaluation. So we'd like to make sure that, the report is the report, it's public record, but the survey, which I'll talk about next, will have some attached material for respondents to review before they express their opinion. We'd like that attached material to express these options with a balanced view of the pros and cons. And finally, the public consultation survey, it doesn't look to us like it's been prepared with very much forethought. I don't like to be critical, but it's extremely cursory. It doesn't look like it would give you any significant background to what the opinion of people truly is. We'd like to be sure that people are answering it in a fair and reasonable way, and it sounds to me like people go to the Let's Talk website and submit as many responses as they would like, and all of these kind of things could go on. We just feel like there needs to be more robustness about the survey. We would like to make sure that people have read the background material, at least that they represent that they have. We want to make sure that the material is to do with option D and not Connor Park by itself. And we don't want to add an additional delay, but honestly to suggest that we will have a closing date of January the 15th and an opening date for this survey starting today, it doesn't make sense to us. So those are all the things I have to say, and I would just like you to, if you would, ask the staff all of these questions on our behalf and have some public response to them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As always, you folks are very well organized. I think what we're going to do procedurally here is I'm going to open the floor to questions to the delegation from the directors, and then our staff will present their report and hopefully some responses to some of the questions that you've raised. So,
Thank you, Chair.
Directors, do we have any questions? Well, I'll jump in with one. I'm not actually familiar with the stage at Hackett Park. So what was it that you had in mind?
It's actually, even though, as I've said, the specifics, it's actually very pretty. It's very, very nicely done. It's a concrete stage, probably, I think, 2 feet above the bottom of the park. It has 2 trees as sort of the front supports of the hall, which I believe were donated by the community forest. And it has a stage area which goes back maybe 20 feet or something like that. So you can put a musical performance on there. You could have dances there. You could use it for a movie. You could put the screen down and have outdoor movies. These are the kind of things, exactly the kind of things that we anticipate. Hackett Park has a bit of an advantage because it has a natural kind of amphitheater to it, which of course Cooper's Green is flat. We wouldn't have that opportunity, but it's that sort of size and scale. Has a sloping roof. I don't recall. And it has a storage space at the back, yes, but not public washrooms. That's another thing. I mean, I haven't talked about public washrooms, but if you demolish the old hall, I would hope that you have to have some accommodation for new washrooms in the park, even if you don't have a hall in the park.
Thank you very much. Okay, directors. Director Stamford.
Has there been a history of flooding for the current building?
As we have understand, there has never been any flooding. It is the hall is relatively close to the beach. I actually went there at a king tide about 2 weeks ago, and there appears presently to be no threat at all. Whenever there's storms and storm surge, the wind is in the southeast, and that location is protected in the bay. It faces northwest. So no, I believe there's not only no flooding to date, but I think it's very unlikely for a long time. Unless the ocean rises by 3 or 4 feet, then there's no chance of flooding.
Okay, thanks.
Director Gabias.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for coming with this presentation. You make some good points. I wish I had a little bit more time but now's the time. Thank you. Very well presented and put together, as always. I agree that there has to be a bit more transparency as to what the options are. And in the sake of transparency, I would like to know, because the location is so crucial to, or the involvement of the community association is very much dependent on the location, as far as I understand. I'm not sure if the community association would be open to operating the hall if it was at Connor. I think that's another discussion, but I think it would be good for the purpose of the survey to know how the community association plans on operating the hall. Like what would a typical week look like? What kind of, like, how many paid events there would be? How much programming, like yoga, hot lunches for seniors, that kind of stuff. Like, just to give because it's so the options, they're kind of apples and oranges if the community association is involved or not. So I would like to know what it would look like if the community association did operate it.
I'll try and make a couple of statements there. I'll defer to my colleagues to add to it. First of all, as far as Connor Park goes, we don't think we're in a position to operate a hall there. It's not for any reason other than our membership largely and our volunteers are not centered in Welcome Woods, and it may be in a future that we may have some sort of a restructuring of our membership and our board members, entirely possible, but for the present time, we don't feel like we could generate enthusiasm among our volunteers to make an operation happen there. As far as a hall at Cooper's Green goes, which is not in the lower park, if it's a smaller hall, we really haven't considered yet whether or not we could operate in that fashion. We just haven't really thought it through. We are very familiar with the events of the kind that we run ourselves, so we would be certainly more capable of dealing with things at Cooper's Green than at Connor Park. As far as numbers of events, we have been through, and I'm not sure whether you know about the details, but we have been through detailed discussions with staff about an operating plan which has been drafted. We've provided what we think are, as best we know, the estimated number of events, number of times that we might be able to rent it for private individuals to do their birthday parties or their committee meetings or whatever. So we've estimated all of those things. We've used a table of what we think are a reasonable set of rental rates for community members versus also for commercial use. If somebody wanted to run their company retreat or something, which would be a different rate. We put all that together a year ago, a little bit less, a year ago. Yeah. So that's sort of there. We could share it, but it's in quite a bit of detail. It's all about the hall that was designed with the size, the number of tables and chairs, and the capacity of the hall, the size of the kitchen, the availability of the patio outside, and how big that is, and so it's all dependent on that hall. We could revise it and redo the thing for the upper knoll, but we'd have to know what the hall looks like. But we certainly did look at all those kind of things: yoga classes, private things, people maybe having use of the commercial kitchen in order to be able to offer a concession stand at the patio. All of these different kinds of things were considered, but I can't recall actual numbers at this stage. One thing I would mention, and I'm sorry I forgot to mention this here, it's not directly to do with your question, but it is to do with the two different locations. The funding that we have that is in trust with the SCRD is close to $400,000. It's about half of it resulted from individual community members donating, and half of it was originated from a donation that the Community Association made following the sale of the other hall that used to be a hall in Welcome Beach on Redruth Road. In our memorandum of understanding, the money that we, the association, have donated is required to be used at Cooper's Green, and we don't think we have any latitude to do anything with it other than at Cooper's Green. And we know that a lot of our community members have said, a fair number have said, we would like a refund of our donations if it's not built there. What we would do if there was not going to be, like if the SCRD decided not to pursue a hole at Cooper's Green, we would ask those people not to ask for a refund, but rather to redirect their money to upgrades to the park, and in particular a performance space. It's your park, the SCRD, and it would be your project to build whatever's going to be built there. So it's not like we don't need your support. We can't do it by ourselves, but that would be significant. That would change your budget numbers to some degree. I thought I should mention that. Sorry, not quite your question, but I omitted that in my presentation.
Thank you. Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I have a whole lot of questions, actually, but I'll go one at a time, Adam. Have your concerns and questions been asked through a consultation process between your group and our staff? Have you talked about this recently?
We've had some conversations with them. Most recently, we have not been able to talk to them. This is just when we saw the report last Friday evening. The fact that it doesn't address option D, as we had, which was our previous conversation with them, that was a surprise to us, and we have not had a chance. Oh, I'm not. No, we haven't talked to. No, we haven't talked to the staff since then. Hasn't been any opportunity since then.
Thank you. I'll save. Can I ask another question, or would you like me? Okay. The moving the hall back still seems to be on the table with your group. Have you clearly defined what would put that question to bed in what your presentation was right now? Or is there more you'd like to see?
The staff report mentions, I'm going by my recollection here, that any finding to do with the location at the front of the park near the seawall will also apply to other sites that are also in that floodplain. We don't know that that's actually true, and without getting into the detail, if there was ocean level rise, let's say 3 feet, then any little storm would likely flood the park, but 2 feet may be enough for that. Whether the additional disruption of waves and storm surge applies at the back of the park just as much as the front of the park, we don't know. Obviously, ocean level rise, if it goes over the top of the thing and the park is flat, well, it's going to flood everywhere. But storm surge, wave action, when you're further from the seawall, yeah, we don't know whether that might have dissipated. So we don't know the answer to that. We'd like to. It's always the situation. Well, if you're not prepared to look at it there, is this a possibility? Is that a possibility? So we don't know that exactly the same question as the front of the park, but again, it's part of the clear statement that hasn't been made, we believe.
Andy, I might be able to, and Leonard, if I could add something to that.
If you're going to address it, please use the microphone, because otherwise anyone on Zoom cannot hear you.
Yep, okay. First of all, thank you. My name is Don Cunliffe. I'm a director of the organization and have been involved in this construction project for probably going on 8 years. I have been very interested in ocean flooding, and I would like to add to this comment here regarding the hall potentially at the back end of the park. I mean, we are talking about wave energy. We're talking about flooding that comes up maybe potentially 100 feet beyond the surface of the beach here. We all know, and if I read the literature right, that wave run-up dissipates through friction, absorption, and whatever. By the time you get to the back of the park, it will be very much less than it would be at the front of the beach. So that encouraged us to think about having a hall at the southeast corner as opposed to, if the report is correct, at the beach level. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask for Director Box, since he hasn't spoken yet.
We're talking about putting this hall possibly be floodplain, whether it's at the front of the park or it's at the back of the park. That's one thing.
Just a minute, Director
is
Bax. If we're having some trouble with your audio breaking up, so perhaps you could start again from the beginning.
My question has to do with, is there insurance available for the hall in which specific location? Would the fact that it's near the seawall negate the insurance? Would the fact that it's near the back of the plane allow for the building to be insured? Is there any information on that?
It's not information that we have. We would defer that question to the staff.
Thank you. Director Stamford.
So I'm just trying to paraphrase to make sure that I understand your request. Your first preference would be to stay at Cooper's Green at the back of the park, is that correct? Or the upper, quote unquote, upper part of the
So there are 3 locations in the park that have been considered in recent discussion. Yep. The original, which is where the current hall is built, and then one further back, and the one which is on higher ground, much higher ground, clearly not affected by ocean flooding. Our preference, if there is no clear statement of a reason why we collectively could not build the hall on its original site, then our preference would be, okay, let's pick up the tools where we were on July the 17th or whenever it was that we got the bad news, and let's get back to it. That would be our first option.
So back to it, meaning where in the park?
At the front of the park on the original site, which replacing the old hall with a new structure on the same spot.
But
if that is not possible,
okay,
then we would certainly say we should consider whether or not the spot in the back of the park has less effect or less risk of ocean flooding than the front of the park. And if there's a clear statement that both of those are not possible, then we would say our preference would be, and we believe that, and we're representing the community because the community voted through public consultation in 2017 or 18, I can't remember which, that the preference was for Cooper's Green Park. So we're not expressing personal opinion here. We're expressing what we believe is community opinion. But we would agree that in that case, absolutely, go for some further consultation. But it should be public consultation which stands some scrutiny in comparison with the public consultation that was done in 2017, not a cursory, what do you think?
Oh.
kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I guess I wasn't clear. I just trying to find where your preference is. So it's park.
Yes.
Cooper's Green Park first.
Yes.
In all three options. And then option D,
Yes,
your last preferred option
yes,
would be Connor Park plus the open stage
yes.
at Green Park. Okay.
That's exactly
at
right.
Cooper's
Thank
Green.
you.
Okay.
Thanks for the clarification.
Okay, Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. This is quite a confusing issue. I was hoping it would get clearer as I went along, and it seems to be getting more confusing as I go along. From what I just heard, you still consider it an option to build on the original site? I hadn't heard why you thought that might be an option. And then your second option is to build on the back of Cooper's Green because you believe the run-up at the back of the park is likely insignificant and could be mitigated. Therefore, a park could be built there and be used satisfactorily. So I think do I have those two right?
One, I would say, Don will give us some more detail. We have heard from staff that they believe that they have done their due diligence on the lower park options, both of them. But we have not heard truly, clearly, precisely what due diligence, what it is that has come to this conclusion that those two options are not possible. We're looking for that statement, and we feel like this is what will give us all direction. If there is a clear statement that I don't know why it would be that the geotechnical consultant would have changed his mind between 2018. It's still not a habitable building. It's still the same park. It's still the same Salish Sea. We're not sure why it would have changed, but if it has changed and there's a valid reason, we would like to hear it. And then we'll know that we have to look at different options. That's where we're at. If we can't get that statement, it would be suggest that the original site is still viable, which would be a surprise after 5 months, but we just want to know. Right? Don, you have some additional comment?
No, I think that's, Leonard, that's the way I would have responded to your question. Thank you.
Thank you. That's clearer.
Okay, I'm hoping that we can start wrapping this up and move on to the staff report. Director Stanford, your hand is okay. Director Gabius.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, this might actually be a question for staff, actually, but I'll ask it anyway. The upper knoll option, well, I guess I'll ask the delegation, is this still preferable for the community association? Is the upper knoll location preferable to option D?
All other things equal, yes. But we don't know what the equal is, and that's why we're looking for more clarity. You okay with that?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Okay, one last one, Director Lee.
This is something we would probably ask, I believe, after but from everything I've heard right now, including the fact that you were thinking that a public consultation survey needs to have background to it that's been researched and included, and maybe, I don't know if you were looking for public presentations as well, but a lot of written documentation attached to it. That could easily put a 6-month delay in this thing. Is that acceptable to your group?
No, it's not. We agree with the staff that the time has passed where we can make a decision to delay by 6 months or 12 months to get into more contracts with more geotechnical consultants. We agree with that. We need to get on quickly. What I'm envisaging is the staff report, the meat of that, to be revised to reflect some of the things that we've suggested so that it's more even. Publish that along with the survey. The survey, I think, could be improved. I don't think it would take more than a few hours of a staff person's time to do that. and then give it a tiny bit longer and don't start in the middle of December. And I'm not really sure that the staff anticipates that you're going to say, yes, issue the survey today, but I would expect that it would take, maybe a month is long enough, absolutely possible, but have a balanced version of the report for consumption by respondents and give it a month maybe after the new year. So we're talking weeks later, not months later, not 6 months.
Thank you very much. I think we're at the end of our speakers list, as all, yeah. Excellent. Thank you very much for coming. And
Thank you
as
for the
always-
opportunity.
Good. Thank you very much. All right. Next on our agenda is the Coopers Green Hall Replacement Project construction update. And I'm going over to GM Gagnon.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, members of the association and others for coming today. The staff has had many conversations with the community association up until last Friday, correct? We've had lots of great conversation, long conversation, robust discussion and debate. We agree to disagree on some things, and we agree on some things. So I don't really have further introduction to the report because the report is as it is. However, I appreciate the opportunity perhaps to provide some response to the questions that were posed this morning, provided to staff as well at the same time. You know, I think I'll start by saying I think the things that we can agree upon is that time is of the essence, that we're feeling the pressure of a deadline of a grant that is funding almost 50% of this project. I think that we agreed on the fact that we have a budget that we feel should be sufficient for a community hall, even though that is a community hall being built larger than any other community hall that the organization supports, almost twice the size to that matter. But I think we agreed, and the board has supported that budget. And we want to stay within that budget. I think we agreed that we didn't want to come back to the board and ask for more money. And so part of the challenge is that the increasing challenges of the lower park provide a risk of greater costs. So I'm not going to answer the technical question because I will leave that to my technical beside us. But I will start that conversation by saying we rely on the expertise of professionals. And as an organization, we tend not to go against the advice of professionals. And so we do have a geotechnical report that was provided to us in both 2018 and recently, both of which been shared freely and openly with the community association with lots of conversation. And I will let Manager Doyle speak to even the conversation that we've had with the geotechnical engineer, similar to the conversation that occurred with the first report. To which we have an email, which is not a stamped report from the technical or the technical expertise back in 2018, but an email. But I will let Manager Doyle speak to where we're at today and the report that we have today that we've shared with the Community Association and why that's led to the staff recommendation that's in front of you.
Thank you, Chair. A lot of things said today, a lot of confusion about the situation we're in. A professional engineer, when it provides recommendations, are bound by a series of a code of conduct, code of ethics, their professional practice regulations, guidelines, standards. In the communication with the engineer in 2017, the report was produced that provided a recommendation for a flood construction level. That's the minimum building elevation at which the facility should be built. Through communication with staff, there was some conversation about having that number revised, but I don't believe there was ever an official communication or official correspondence, as it was called earlier. The correspondence that we did have did not mention anything about the site having no wave action. It was just a reference to the fact that as a non-habitable structure, there was no immediate risk to life and limb. And for that reason, the engineer felt that perhaps the flood construction level could be revised to a lower value. Now, as there was no action taken on the initial geotechnical report, there was no follow-up on that recommendation to pursue a official stamped memo, design memo, and it's been years since that was issued. Now, the original geotechnical report in 2017, in the terms of reference, had a 2-year expiry. And so because of that, in 2021, when this project was restarted, we sought a contract, a modest, small contract with the engineering firm. We went through RFP process, and we asked them to confirm the recommendations in that report, and then if they were, able to provide construction evaluation. So confirm that report, sign off on it, and then when we went to construction, they would provide on-site reviews. They came back to us and said that the original flood construction level of 5.3 meters geodetic was the one they were comfortable recommending. Now, they reviewed the report, not the correspondence. That was the request to them. I went back to the geotechnical engineer and I asked them to comment on the flood construction level and why it did not reflect what we had seen in that email. We also asked them to confirm some guidance on siting. Now, at the time of the previous report, the site of the hall was not finalized exactly. There had been just some draft drawings, so we now had a design that located it. We wanted them to comment on that. Their comments were that professional practice guidelines, acceptance of risk, several audits through the EGBC, the Engineers and Geoscientists of British Columbia, have led them to have a better understanding of how to present advice and guidelines, and that for them to recommend a lower flood construction level, they are required by their organization to provide a description of the risk that their recommendations would enable. For example, they needed to quantify and define the risk that recommendation entailed to us. To do that, further study is required, and a more in-depth study. That option was presented in our October 15th report. That was what we talk about when we say we want to go back and ask the geotechnical engineer to do more review. It's to define that risk, so they can say to us, if you build at this level, here is the percent chance of damage or whatever. Furthermore, they identified that our OCP recommended a 7.5 meter setback from the ocean. The construction of the lock block wall adjacent to the building was not designed by that engineer, and a more in-depth review of that wall was required for them to provide a closer setback distance. So these two setbacks also impacted the viability of the project, and staff went back to the board with this new understanding of the risk to the project, understanding the narrow timelines we're working on, and we sought guidance from the board, and that's where we are today.
Okay. I did have a couple of other questions. The question of being able to submit multiple responses to a survey, if it's done through, my recollection, Let's Talk, you have to sign in. Is that correct, in order to answer the survey? Aha, I see our manager of communications. Perhaps he can enlighten us.
Thank you for the question, Chair. Yeah, so there's two ways that we can run a survey on the Let's Talk platform. One involves signing in, which would enable you to answer the survey at one time per sign-in. The other option that we have is we can leave it open. So basically anybody who wants to take the survey can go ahead and can take it. And we have found in the past that, and this was true actually consultation which I had with a number of community associations who said that the sign-in process was actually a barrier to some people going ahead and answering the questions themselves. So those two options are available to us.
Thank you. And I just wouldn't mind a little bit more clarity on where we are with timelines. If staff could just perhaps re-express our timelines.
Thank you, Chair. And if I may, before I answer that question, I want to be very clear. As per the October report that is in front of the board today as well, if the board and if we want more assurity and certainty on the lower park, we must have a more in-depth geotechnical report. It will cost more money, which was identified in that October report, and it will take time. And so if the board chooses to go that direction, we can go that direction. Staff did not recommend it in the December report based on time constraints and also based on a sentiment in the community to stop spending money. But that is a report that would give us more certainty, which I believe is what the community is looking for. So it is possible, and it can certainly be done, but let's just be very clear that it will cost money and it will take time, and there is no guarantee that the result will be different, but we'll have the certainty. The other reason that staff isn't recommending it is because there is the risk of it costing more money in the long run in terms of additional design considerations, both from a capital and an ongoing operating perspective in terms of mitigation strategies. So there was a sentiment as well that we didn't want to ask for yet more money. So those are all uncertainties. We're not disputing that. So that is an option that can be considered by the board today, but it was not something that the staff was recommending. To answer your question about timelines, as the report indicates, we do have a deadline that is as per our agreement that we've signed with the federal and the provincial government. Through conversations with our representation, it is highly likely that we will get a year extension. But I can't apply for that until I have a site that's chosen and we're ready to go, and we know that we need more time. And at that point in time, I can actually apply for a longer extension, but there is no certainty that I will get that at that point in time. So staff feels that another 6, 9, 12 months of further investigation continues to increase the risk of not completing the project in a timely fashion and therefore risking the grant. If we get going in the next 6 to 9 months, then and depending on the site that we choose and the constraints that we're up against, we feel we can get it done, or at least be far enough along that it continues to provide more rationale for a further extension that may or may not be required. But until we make a decision and start moving, I can't even make an application to get anything formal. So I hope that answers your timeline question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go to questions now. Director Stamford.
What is the staff, through the chair to staff, what is the possibility of even delaying the survey by 2 or 3 weeks? Do you have capacity to incorporate that in with your other projects that you're working on in order to make this a more amenable time towards more January, less into December? And what is the possibility of adjusting the survey to provide some of the responses to the questions we've heard today? I understand this isn't regards to the specifics of the engineering question, because that obviously is going to take a lot more information, but generally some of the comments and suggestions. Is there a possibility of doing this and delaying the survey date until January 1st start time?
Thank you, Chair. The survey can be launched whenever we want. Staff wanted to launch it quickly, and that was in response to the Community Association's desire to get moving and get going. So we can delay that till whenever. We are ready to go. We have a very detailed backgrounder that is part of the survey that will be on the website. We have links to every single report that's been presented that is on the website. We've done a little video that will run in collaboration with the survey, and I'm sure that Manager Buckley can speak more to that. But we have the survey questions which are in the report, but the survey is accompanied with far more information on the actual Let's Talk page. If you want us to adjust the questions, or you want us to add a question, I'm not sure where we're going with this. Do we want to add, an additional option? That's at the board's purview today if they want to add anything to that survey. But we certainly, you know, it's our survey. We can launch it whenever we want. We can keep it open as long as we want. What we presented to the board was based on, you know, past conversations around the timeliness, again, of trying to get things out there. Staff acknowledge it will not be a statistically valid survey. It is simply a pulse check. And so those that choose to weigh in will have the opportunity. There's also an open-ended question where people can tell us what they think in addition to the survey questions, which will also be brought forward in the end to inform the discussion at the end of the day. So I don't know if Manager Buckley wants to add more information to the actual survey itself and how it will be presented. Thank you.
Thank you, GM Gagnon. Just through the chair, yeah, so we do have quite a comprehensive information package that would accompany the survey, both online and the paper copies as well. We worked to ensure that we could present the material pertaining to each location in as easy and understandable fashion as possible. As GM Gagnon mentioned, we do have a video which kind of outlines super high level you know, what we're looking for and the types of questions that we are going ahead and asking. And we also have quite a comprehensive communications plan that's ready to go too, that would essentially, you know, ensure that this gets out to the community through community associations and as well through local media and social media as well. So yeah, so we've prepped this in such a manner that we were ready to go should the board make that decision today. Thank you.
Okay, Jim Gagnon, your hand is up, so do you have anything further?
Thank you, Chair. One of the other questions that was raised by the Community Association that I would like the opportunity to address, because I think it's germane to what we're talking about right now, is related to option D and whether or not that is part of the survey. And so this was one of the areas that we agreed to perhaps disagree on how my report was presented. I felt that to offer the assurance that money could be taken from the project if we were building at Connor Park and be provided to Cooper's Green improvements was not a decision that I could make. It was a decision that the board would have to support, because that was not the way that the $4.5 million was approved to be spent on. It was a change from the original intent of that budget. However, I did refer to that in the report and suggest that if there were surplus funds, that those could be reinvested back into the park if that was the decision, but didn't feel that it was staff's authority to be able to make that statement. Do staff feel that that could be of both situations, whether the park or the hall is at Connor Park or it's at Cooper's Green? If there's surplus funds from either project, they could be reinvested into the park. And if I'd only said that about Connor Park, I felt I was actually being unbiased then and trying to sway people toward one of the options. And I will suggest that we did our best to try and not sound biased. Now, apparently, that's obviously not how some people are reading the report. And I respect everybody's opinion at that. But we were trying to stay unbiased and only state what we knew to be true in the report. Thank you. But if there is a desire by the board to support surplus funds being invested back into the park, I think that this needs to be defined differently, because I would suggest that that is not the way the money was approved. But personally, staff think that's a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go next to Director Gabius.
Thank you, Chair. I guess you, Jim Gagnon, you answered a bit of my question. In regards to option D, I was surprised to not see option D in this latest report, just because that was the latest proposal, and that's what went to community consultation last, and it did have a pretty positive response. So it was a little strange to not see that as an option. I think it's maybe a bit confusing to the community when that option just kind of disappears and gets off the table. So I would, knowing that if there's a hall at Connor Park and the current hall at Cooper's Green does get demolished, which I understand is a requirement of the grant, if I'm not mistaken, we are left with, yes, like porta potties at Cooper's Green. And so this needs to be considered. I think we do need to put some resources at Cooper's Green, because it will remain a very popular spot and will need some upgrades. So how do we do that? How do we do that? The community association is proposing to take that the money that was raised by the community, combined with the sale of the Welcome Beach Hall, to put towards Cooper's Green. Like, how feasible is this? I guess it's kind of my question. Like, so that would mean that money would come out of the budget for the hall, and so taxation would need to be increased in order to meet that 26%. Am I making any sense?
Thank you, through the chair. So the funds that were raised, if there is a determination that the hall does not go at Cooper's Park, then SCRD has made a commitment to go back to all of those donors and to ask them whether or not they want their funds to follow where the hall does go, or whether they want a reimbursement of those funds. And then we will work with the CRA to honor the reimbursement of those funds. If the donors want to see their funds invested into Cooper's Park, or Cooper's Green Park, then that's certainly their prerogative if they want to remove that from the budget. So what I would suggest would happen is that the budget would be reduced by those funds. And that, again, in my mind, is a board decision in terms of there was $350,000, I don't know the exact number, but is in the report, in terms of an expectation by the board as part of the commitment to the overall budget for the construction of a hall. But the challenge is that if the site doesn't go at Cooper's Green, then those funds, folks may want those funds back, and many of them certainly have expressed that. So what the report says, again, is that if the funds are returned based on the wishes of the donors, that the overall budget for the construction of the hall be reduced by that amount. In terms of the overall budget, again, option D, it makes great sense, because I know that the community association, the community at large, if they don't get a hall at the park, it leaves, the park is the heart of where a lot of things take place. It's a beautiful location. And so they would like to see that investment back into the park. The results of the ad hoc poll from the community association were never shared back formally with the SCRD. So we had some conversation, the president and I, around where it was leaning, but we never did hear back. It wasn't presented as an option in my report because I didn't feel that staff had the authority to present that option. But it could be added if the board feels from a financial perspective that they're willing to do that, simply because it was not part of the discussion and the approval of the original 4.5. The original 4.5 was about a hall. It was not about improvements to the park. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to weigh in slightly here. I don't think any of the rural directors came prepared today to make a decision, a final decision about Cooper's Green Park, although we could. I mean, that is an option. But I really feel that everybody needs to, especially since 3 of the 5 directors are new to this, The option D was sent to us by email, but it has not been on any public agenda. And so if we want in some way to formalize that as an option, we could do that. But today, I think we need to make the decision about whether to do the survey. And I would resist making the survey more complicated than we have to. I think the opportunity for people to weigh in will be abundantly taken up by folks in the community who want to tell us what they think. So anyway, I just wanted to get clear on that, and over to Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I've been scribbling a little notes down here, and I'm kind of curious if I've got them right in my memory, if it's failed me or not. When we thought we were building at Cooper's Green, the project come in larger than we anticipated, and we had to add additional taxpayers' dollars, and so we did do that, and we're collecting them. But the premise we were collecting those taxpayers' dollars was for a hall at Cooper's Green, if I remember it right. Now we're talking about building a similar hall, probably different design, at Connor Park. And we're not sure of the financial implications of that yet. We could be asking for more taxpayers' dollars, less taxpayers' dollars. We could be moving the donations from building at Connors Park to building something different at Cooper's Green. I believe all of these are going to have a motion at the board before we do any of this. And it will have to be clear to us what we're voting on at that time. And I suspect at that time we would be talking about whether we would leave the existing hall up and building a, let's call it a pagoda or something, performance center. But that's a different project if we did that. In my mind, it's a different project if we did that at Cooper's Green. And we'd be looking at the financing, trying to figure that out. So we got two things we need to do. How do you explain that in your survey? Because I think if I was getting this survey right now, I would assume we had the money, we could move the money, we could build the hall. And I don't believe that's factual. So when you ask the question, I kind of confused what question we're actually asking the people.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the question. So the $4.5 million that was approved by the board in this past spring was around a hall at Cooper's Green. The grant has requirements in it. And one is that you have to build a new hall. And two, part of it is around the demolition of the old hall. And three is around that it has to be in Half Moon Bay. So I think where the conversations with the community association were, well, if we're not at Cooper's Green and we end up at Connor Park, we still want an investment back into Cooper's Green, and we want assurance of that there will be something for the community at Cooper's Green. And so the conversation was, well, given the fact that there's limited site constraints at Connor Park, I'll back up. I think the other thing we had agreed on is that we don't want to have to come back to the board for more money. That $4.5 million is we hope sufficient, right, at either location. Looking at the locations, intuitively, I think we feel that we might be able to build a little bit cheaper at Connor Park, and so there might have been a surplus that's as a result of that. And could the board then provide assurance that if there was a surplus at the end of the day, using the $4.5 million as our ceiling and building a hall at Connor Park, could we use that surplus to reinvest back into the park? And would the board provide that assurance. I think that's what the community's looking for, and staff didn't feel like we had the authority to do that. So if you wanted us to add something to the survey around the assurance of, if you go to Connor Park and there's a surplus at the end of the day, it will be invested back into Cooper's Green. That's, I think, what the association is looking for to be put into the survey. So you're not making that decision, but you could support that in principle in a survey to hear back from the community about that. I don't think they're asking for more money. However, they are saying if you go to Connor Park, we want our $400,000 back to be invested in it. So then all that does is drop the budget from 4.5 million to 4.1 million, and you can have your $400,000 and work with the staff to look at a park enhancement project. So, you know, we can skin that cat one way or the other, but that decision is not in front of you today. However, you could support in principle today as change to the survey, that to see what the community would think about that, similar to what the community association did in their little ad hoc survey as well. Did that answer your question, Director Lee?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Well, speaking from Area E, I actually think that option D is a really good option. And in principle, this is something I could support. I think it's an excellent compromise. We certainly need washrooms at Cooper's Green, for heaven's sakes. I mean, yes. And an outdoor performance space would be gorgeous. So I'm reluctant to, I'm happy to do a sort of a go around the directors to see how everyone feels. I'm a little reluctant to try and draft a motion on the fly here. That always worries me, because we end up having to back off and vote ourselves out again. But I'm just going to go around the directors to see how people feel about option D. Director Stamford, you're looking eager.
Yeah, that option D certainly does seem like an option worth pursuing. I've seen a similar scenario in Palm Beach Park, which is just in the Powell River area, with washrooms and the open space for performances, with a separate community center further down the road. I think that's something I'd like to have the community consider, as long as it all fits within all the other priorities that we're looking at, which includes the requirements for the grant. It includes the fact that there's general taxpayers' money going into this. This is wider than the community associations participation in this. So that is what I'd like to pull back to. And so that is a reason I'd like to see that option provided in the survey. Understanding that there's implications to that if that is the direction we go, it does seem fairly clear that the community association there will be concerns around who operates a community center in Connor Park and all the implications around there. But yes, I would like to see that pursued.
Thank you, Director Box.
It's pronounced Bax. So if I'm to understand, we're supposed to create a survey for the public to look at. And option A, which is the lower portion, is off the table until we get a lengthy and expensive geotechnical survey. Option B would be the upper knoll, which seems like a reasonable option. Option C would be nothing in Connor Park and, nothing in Cooper's Green, but a haul in Connor Park. And option D is something in a hall in Otter Park and Performance Pagoda in Cooper's Green. Is that correct?
I'll go to staff on that.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you for the question, Director Bax. So staff in the report have not recommended any further exploration of the lower park site. If the board, or if the committee, sorry, desires us to do further exploration, that will require a different motion. It will require a motion from a directive and also a financial perspective. So what the survey as presented today by staff for your consideration suggests is Upper Knoll at Cooper's Green or Connor Park. And what is my understanding being explored right now is adding to the Connor Park the portion about Connor Park plus upgrades to Cooper's Green within the available budget is what I understand to be what the board, or what the committee is deliberating. And further to that, in consultation with Manager Reid, I do not need a resolution around that. We can simply make that change to the survey. So that's my understanding, so I just want to make sure that that is your understanding as well.
Thank you. Director Gabius.
Thank you, Chair. Would it be possible to add another option to the survey, which would be to conduct further exploration of the southeast corner location at Connor Park at a cost and at a, adding time, adding a delay and adding extra cost? I feel like that should be posed, as well as the option D, just because it's a survey and it's, it's to take the pulse of the community. And I think that might be a good option for the community to look at. Because the community doesn't, some people have said no more delays, no more money. But there is a portion of the community who, would be ready to take that risk or to go there. So wondering if that would be a possibility for that survey.
Thank you for the question. Certainly we can add that question to the survey, and I would suggest that it's not about the southeast corner, because it doesn't matter whether it's in the southeast corner or in the existing location. The same rules will apply to the lower park. So we can, it really, the mitigation strategies might be different based on the location in the lower park, but we need that detailed geotechnical analysis to tell us what that will look like for the different areas. So we would do an analysis of the lower park in that detailed piece. So we can add to the survey to find out from the community if they wish to spend time and money to have that certainty as one. The second would be the Upper Knoll. The third, and this is where I just want clarification, do you want two options around Connor Park, or do you just want to say Connor Park with upgrades to the Cooper's Green within existing budget? Because I think from what I hear the community association saying is without that, they don't support Connor Park either. So maybe there's just three now that we're deliberating. One is get the certainty on the lower park to check it off the list. The second is Upper Knoll, and the third would be Connor Park, inclusive of upgrades to Cooper's Green within the existing budget.
Thank you. That, personally for me, is challenging. Because I'm not sure that the board has the willingness, frankly, to invest a lot more money in the waterfront site. I mean, we haven't even mentioned archaeology yet. One of the advantages of the Upper Knoll is that solid rock doesn't have a lot of archaeology as a rule. At any rate, I'm going to keep going through the list. So Director Stanford.
I was just going to say that there is a certain level of discomfort furthering work on close to the waterfront for the reasons Director McMahon suggested. Also, I don't think you're going to get the certainty that you need to make that jump. There's always going to be a level of uncertainty involved with working within that close to the waterfront. I did understand the comments made about there's never been storms, there's nothing like that that's happened. We said that last month in New Brighton, and a storm came in from a direction that we've never seen before, caused tremendous devastation. And we're still trying to pick up the costs and the pieces of that particular aberration, which given the direction that we're getting from climate scientists, we're going to see more of, and we just don't have that certainty within 5-year frames. What they said was certain in 2017 is not what's certain in 2022. So right now, I'm quite uncomfortable with pursuing further an option right at the waterfront. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Box. Bax.
We'll get it soon. One of the issues that Director McMahon brought up earlier that I'd like to make sure that's forefront in the survey is that it's not just the community association in Half Moon Bay or the taxpayers of Half Moon Bay, but it's all the taxpayers of all the regional districts that are putting in for this hall. So that and if the survey is open to all the residents of all the rural districts of the hall, then and I really think that the lower park, from what I understand, the delay and the cost is really writing that part off. So that should be talked about within the survey as well. If that's going to be added to the survey, that there's going to be a certain amount of cost, a certain amount of play that's going to impinge on the ability of the use of the grants. Again, that's the major portion of the funding. I guess not so much a question as I wanted to see if that makes sense.
I think that there will be a lot of information provided along with the survey. And of course, I'm sure the community association will be providing additional information. So, and this survey is to inform. It is not, we're not voting on this, as this is not a referendum. This is just, as staff said, a taking the pulse of the community to see how they feel, and to try and focus it on, are we really want to have it at Cooper's Green, or would we consider the alternative of Connor Park? And I think that makes it fairly straightforward. Director Lee?
Thank you, Chair. I'm sure I can complicate this more quite easily here. I just to confirm what I heard, the southeast corner will add cost and delay, and we've talked about it already. It's a geotech engineer, has to be a full survey, has to be all that stuff. We're something like 3 to 6 months and something like $100,000 more. Is I'm close to that, if staff could answer that one?
Thank you, Chair. So our October 13th report articulated our understanding of the costs and time associated with this option. Through discussions, informal discussions with some engineers, we put it at about $85,000 for the report, plus $10,000 to fund the subsequent community engagement,
Which we wouldn't need.
which wouldn't be applicable here.
Just the 85.
And then we looked at a 6 to 9 month timeline. And that's, given consideration that the review of the initial report, which was a fairly basic effort, took about 4.5 months to get back to us. So 6 to 9 months might be optimistic even.
Thanks, I'm surprised I come that close. So that's one possible option we could add to the survey if we wanted. The other one is to build at Connor Park, and we would have a potential surplus. We then would decide whether to reinvest in a performance center and washrooms at Cooper's Green. I didn't hear the one on the knoll with the Waterside Performance Center, though. I don't know why I didn't hear that one. Seems like something I'd like to have. Let's not add it, though, huh? So in my mind here, we're going from an extremely valuable resource on the water to not so much one in the woods, which is another haul. I'm weighing that, considering taxpayers' dollars. So this is going to be a tough questionnaire you're putting out there. I am in favor of option D after all that, including it. Thank you.
Thank you for that additional complication. We really needed that, Director Lee. Director Gabius.
Thank you, Chair. I guess it's more of an observation, and I really appreciate all the work that's gone into this. It is the energy and the love, and I think I would love, as a representative of Half Moon Bay, I would love to know what the majority of the community wants. That's kind of my goal and my job here. So a survey is great for that, but ultimately it is very apparent today that, I'm one vote. There's other area directors who have their vote, and it does seem to me like option D has quite a bit of support and could be a good way forward to, I don't know the details of Connor Park. There hasn't been a lot of information about that site, and I would love to see more. But just an observation that this is something that we're all going to be voting on, and yeah, it's we need to be able to convince my colleagues here that we're picking the right one, the right option. So, thank you.
Thank you. At this point, I am really fairly desperately hoping that somebody will want to make a motion. Perhaps somebody would like to move the staff's recommendations on page 1.
Do we need to add specifics around that option D?
Staff.
Or is that clear?
Thank you, Chair. From my understanding, you don't necessarily need to add it to the resolution, because all you're suggesting is that we conduct the survey. However, what staff would like clarity on, just so we can make sure that the survey is reflective of the discussion today, is what staff have recommended is Upper Knoll at Connor Park, or, oh my goodness, Upper Knoll at Cooper's Green and Connor Park. And what I heard today reflected was Upper Knoll or Connor Park with that being the option D, with the amenities back at Cooper's Green. What I'm not clear on, because I don't think there was consensus on that, so maybe I'll just look to the chair, whether or not you want that third option around the lower park and the further investigation around that lower park as an option. And as you said, it's only to inform the final decision, and perhaps if it's in the survey and there's overwhelming response to that, then that might further inform the discussion for ultimately the decision. But again, it's the will of the committee for what goes in the survey.
Thank you. I'm going to suggest that we move the recommendations and then argue about what's in the survey.
So seconded.
Okay, it is moved, it is seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Okay, we have passed the recommendations on page 1. I believe that there is consensus on, as you said, the Upper Knoll plus Connor Park with a commitment from the board to improve the amenities at Cooper's Green. I personally don't support adding a third option for the waterfront, but I'm willing to hear where other directors are coming from. Director Gabius, your hand is up, so you're first.
Didn't even have to raise it. Perma raised. I would like to see that option on the survey for the sake of my having input from the residents in my area. I think that's an important one.
Director Bax.
You're getting better at it. I would, with that option for the lower portion of Cooper's Green, it must include the time delays and the estimated costs.
Okay, 2 more directors to go. Who's up? Director Stanford?
I'm willing to support the director for who's responsible with the Cooper's Green. So
Okay, Director Lee, you're it. We're taking a temperature check to see how many options we want on this survey. Please do not add more.
No, I, of course, will be happy to support Area B Director.
In that case, it sounds like we now have 3 options on the survey. Is that sufficient direction for staff to manage?
Thank you, Chair. Staff, along with those staff that are not necessarily in the room but listening in, have taken copious notes. Appreciate the great conversation and discussion. Certainly appreciate the feedback from the Community Association as well as committee members, and I feel that we have clear direction. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to suggest that we take a 5-minute break right now and return at 11:10 for the next agenda item. Thank you very much. So, welcome back to the Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of December the 15th, 2022. We are at item 4 on the agenda, which is Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch Liquor Primary New Outdoor Patio Application for Royal Canadian Legion Branch 219. Director Bax, I see your hand is up.
I am going to have to recuse myself from this discussion in an overabundance of caution due to my relationship with Legion 219.
Thank you, Director. Participants. Sorry, just checking to make sure that Director Bax is recused, which he is. So I now turn to staff for this report. Planner Xiao.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a follow-up report on the patio liquor license endorsement for the Roberts Creek Legion. So since the last committee meeting, the Legion has further considered staff recommendation, particularly the condition for covenant to control the operation of the patio, and indicated that they were not able to commit to a covenant. In the liquor license referral, LCRB asked the local government to collect views of the public and provide a recommendation which may include conditions that are deemed to be important to address public concerns raised through the consultation process. So while the covenant is a tool to implement these conditions, and it has been used for other outdoor liquor servicing premises in the SCRD. It will be ultimately up to the LCRB to decide what condition to impose and what tool to use to implement them, until LCRB has reviewed various aspects of the application, including public feedback, impact of noise on nearby residents, impact on the community, and SCRD recommendations. So therefore, instead of requiring a covenant upfront, staff recommend providing LCRB with a set of general conditions for the issuance of the license and the operation of the patio under the license. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just to be clear, the feedback that we got from the public that is included in our report, is that forwarded to the liquor control branch, or do they ask for people to submit separately to them?
Yes, those comments have been forwarded to the Legion because it's open to the public on the board's agenda.
No, sorry. Are the public comments, do they go to the LCRB? Or
no, the comments goes to SCRD because we asked them to provide feedback to us directly.
okay, but we forward our full report to the LCRB?
Yes. If the board decided to support staff recommendation, the recommendation will be forwarded to the LCRB along with all the reports, all the public feedback.
Okay, that was my question. So, over to the directors. Are there any further questions, concerns? Director Gabius.
Thank you, Chair. Let me just lower my hand before I forget. I have a question about the hours of operation of this patio. I'm a little confused because it says the patio will operate from Thursday to Saturday, 5 to 8. And then lower down in the report, it says the music is from 5 to 8. I'm wondering what happens after 8 p.m.?
Staff?
Thank you. if the operation after 8 o'clock is not in the condition, then it is not will not be recommended to be under any control.
So just to follow up, the liquor license for the patio is not restricted to those hours, only the outdoor entertainment?
The conditions as they are worded are particularly for the operation that is under the liquor license. For example, if the patio is open for other venues that are not when the alcohol is not being served, then it will not be subject to these requirements.
Thank you. Director Stamford.
I'm not clear how this is going to be enforced. Could you give me some explanation of how this would be carried out on a daily basis?
As I mentioned, so how these requirements will be carried out or implemented will be ultimately decided by the LCRD. So at this point, the SCRD does not have the authority to implement any of those requirements.
Director Lee, you haven't had a kick at this yet.
I was wondering if we could hear from the Legion person, if they were interested in talking to us about this. I see that there is someone in the waiting room.
Okay, I'll take my prerogative as chair, and I'm going to promote the Legion into the meeting. There we go. Welcome to our meeting. Did you have anything that you wanted to say about this liquor license application?
Yes. So the application, the terms that you, Senior Planner Sao has outlined there are definitely ones that we can agree to and I think make work with our volunteers and our staffing. I think what I'm hearing is a concern that the outdoor patio would be open after 8 o'clock. Is that what I was hearing? We wouldn't be able to really manage that. It requires more staffing involved to be able to have somebody, overseeing what's going on outside. The idea is that the outdoor, if we were to have a musical event, it would end at 8. The patio would close. On a day where there isn't a musical event, the patio would close at 8 o'clock as well. And, people would move inside.
Thank you. Director Gabius, your hand is up.
Yeah, following up on this, thank you, Chair. How are you gonna wrangle people that are sitting outside on the patio and bring them back inside? Like that's a concern. Do you have a strategy to do that?
To answer that, the strategy is to just involve our staffing and our volunteers and just announce that the patio is closed. We have been running the outdoor patio throughout COVID. And, as you've seen from the letters, we definitely made some mistakes in the early days. It has become more streamlined, the way that we've been running the patio. this summer we had about, a handful of events that we had outside. I think we were able to manage them fairly reasonably. It's not a large, while the license is for 70, we haven't had that many people outside for our events since COVID, when there was nobody allowed inside. They've been smaller events. We have six-person picnic tables outside. We've brought in some outside chairs on occasion for some of the jazz events that have taken place. But it's really not a large and unruly crowd that's on that patio. It's a fairly quieter and more manageable scene.
Thank you. Well, I guess I'm gonna, Director Lee, do you have anything you want to ask before I weigh in from Area E?
Oh, do you have some more comments? I was just gonna make a motion, but I'll wait.
Yeah, I actually do. I was definitely against the covenant, and so I'm glad that's off the table, because I don't think that was the best tool. Although the Liquor Control Board is responsible for managing these kind of licenses, at the same time, our bylaw officers do get noise complaints. So, if there is a noise issue, we do kind of get hauled into this. And so I'm kind of on the fence, not about having an outdoor patio, because I think that's actually a good idea. COVID hasn't gone away. But the outdoor music is more what concerns me. So, yeah, having a hard time with this one. Over to Director Lee.
Even at my age, I believe 8 o'clock is a reasonable time though, so I'd like to make a motion to accept the recommendations as listed on page 10.
Do we have a seconder? All right, Director Stanford seconds. Thank you very much. Director Gabius.
Yes, I'm not, gotta say, I'm not super familiar with this. Haven't been following this for the last 2 years, but I have a concern about the message that this sends to the neighbors. So it looks like there is a fair number of neighbors who are upset, or whose quality of life has been affected by the concerts and the after-hour pouring out of the Legion, and so, and I can sympathize with that. I think that's it's fair. I mean, this is a rural area, and everybody likes to be live in peace and quiet. And I can see how much of a toll this would take on people, because they, the onus is on them to complain and to contact bylaw officers day after day. So to then extend a liquor license to a outdoor space, I mean, and like echoing Director McMahon, like, I'm not against an outdoor patio. I think they're the best. I think they're awesome. But given that there's already complaints from neighbors, I feel a little uneasy about, agreeing to these recommendations. But I'm also on the fence.
Director Stanford, your turn.
Just to follow up with that, the concern that I have, I look at the specifics of this outdoor music or entertainment. Between 5 and 8, that's 3 hours, Thursday to Saturday, between May 1st, August 31st. So it's through the summer months. It's a time where everyone tends to be outside and enjoying themselves. I am wondering if this could be restricted to no music, that it just be the patio that is open. That's it's the music and whether it's amplified or not. That would be part of my concern here.
So to put you on the spot, would you propose an amendment to the motion that's on the floor?
I propose that the motion be amended to read, number 1, hours for outdoor patio use be limited to 5 to 8. Oh, that's not going to work because you put the patio. No, yeah, it could work. 5 to 8, Thursday to Saturday, May 1st to August 31st, and that there be no music or entertainment included with the license.
Do I see a seconder on that motion? I'm not going to second because okay? Okay. All right, Director Gabius. So that amendment is on the floor. I'm going to speak against it because I'm not sure that we need to limit the hours of the outdoor patio. The concern is about the outdoor noise. So, Director Lee.
Yes, I was going to make the same comments. The patio is kind of something that's needed, and I'm fully supportive of it staying open as long as it needs to be open. I believe the issue is strictly the music and the relatively loud disruption of music can cause. So I wouldn't be in favor of the amendment.
Okay. Director Stanford, did you have another comment, or shall I call the question on the proposed amendment?
Yeah, the intent was simply to lower the noise level. And my understanding was the patio is only open from 5 to 8 anyway. Oh, I see, on the subject, patio. So the intent was only to reduce the music or entertainment.
Okay, thank you. I see.
So we can vote that down and try something different.
Okay, I'm going to call the question. All in favor of the proposed amendment? All opposed? Excellent, we've defeated ourselves. I like this. Can we have a new proposed amendment? Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I was desperately looking for my hand. I believe that basically what we're doing is making a recommendation to the LRB, and they'll make the final decision.
Yeah.
And so I think I'm not sure we should be the ones to start saying whether you can have music or not associated with a meal. So I think that's an LRB decision to make, which I believe this motion would put it onto their plate, so as to speak. So I'm actually talking in favor of the original motion.
Okay, Director Gabius.
Question to whoever can answer. So the LCRB will be making the final decision, but what is their responsibility after the license is issued? From what I understand, it would still be bylaw officers, it would still be, the SCRD would have to enforce these little requirements here. Is that correct?
Staff, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I can try to answer that question. So any issues that related to SCRD bylaws, for example, the noise issues will be enforced by SCRD. But at this point, we are not certain what kind of condition requirement the LCRB will impose on the Legion that goes along with the license. So so if they have specific requirements, it will be their responsibility to enforce those particular requirements.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. I'm not seeing any more speakers. I'm going to call the question. All in favor of the motion on the floor? 2 in favor. All opposed? Okay, we've defeated ourselves again. Is Director Stanford willing to, or is somebody willing to take a throw at a amendment to the recommendation? Director Lee.
I'd just like to make an observation before we carry on here. In my area, we have a lot of short-term rentals, and they have balconies, and they put a lot of music out there, and it sure is amplified. And they can do it for all these hours that they feel like. And when it becomes after those hours, then it becomes a bylaw issue. I see no difference whether you're a business or a resident. The next door neighbor could do the same thing on their balcony. I believe that because of the Legion having to have a liquor license, they have much more reason to ensure that the regulations are followed than their neighbors. So I was thinking of that when I did agree to the motion, and I perhaps should have mentioned that aspect of it. We have the only protection we have from this type of behavior in our neighborhood is the SCRD and the police. And the same would hold true for the Legion's neighbors as well. So I'm concerned that we're trying to hold the Legion to a higher standard than we do the rest of the neighborhood, which is not a very good thing in my mind. So anyways, that's my thoughts.
Director Stanford.
Yeah, I recognize this is really difficult, and my concerns are specifically around the music. I think Director Lee's comments are well taken. Reading the letters behind that were part of this document, this is bigger than just specific requirements for a liquor license and music specifically on the patio. It seems to be a wider question of the number of people accessing the Legion. So it's more than just an individual occurrence. It's a number of people at a venue on a regular basis in a neighborhood. Given that, I do understand that this is specifically to do with a liquor license, which does, you're right, take it to a different level. I'm on the fence, so just don't know what to say.
I have a question for staff, and that is, presumably, if the license is issued in a couple of years, the Legion could go back to the LCRB for another amendment to their liquor license. Is that not the case if they were in a happier relationship with the neighbors?
Thank you, Chair. So staff is not quite clear on how the liquor license will be renewed. So we don't have that information at this point, or how the liquor license will be amended, or being monitored in the future. So we don't have the answer for that.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask the Legion for a comment.
I just wanted to, I guess what I had raised my hand was just to outline our understanding of the recommendation that was made here by staff, was that we weren't allowed, or we would not be allowed to have amplified music outside. That would mean that we wouldn't have music coming from a speaker of any sort. It would be an acoustic guitar. We can't go over, a drum kit goes over that 70 decibel mark. And that's what we realized after that first year of COVID, was that we can't use a drum kit. It has to be, at that point we went to electric drum kits because you can control the sound on a soundboard that way. So our understanding of what's written here is that we wouldn't be able to make that significant level of noise with an acoustic guitar outside. And again, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn for our executive to say that our goal here is less to have the outdoors as a music venue. It was a lot of work. It's a lot of, it was a lot of work, and we're volunteer run with very few staff people. The goal is to kind of hopefully extend our food service area, have a little bit extra area for people to sit outside, enjoy the good weather, have a beverage with their burger, sit on the picnic table, and ideally, if there were an opportunity to have an acoustic musician playing alongside. We see it at Brickers, we've seen it at a lot of outdoor venues, and I don't think it's the same as what we had done in those early days of COVID, and I think that, like I said, we tarnished the neighborhood with those first outdoor events, because it wasn't what we're proposing this time around. And as for the Liquor Control Board, we do have inspectors that come and visit us. We've had, we have a surprise inspections, and then we also have planned inspections. So that's on our end, that's kind of what it looks like for us.
Thank you. Director Gabius.
Thank you, Chair. Forgive my ignorance about liquor licenses. I'm just wondering if a license is issued for this patio, and the complaints, like neighbors are like notice a significant increase in noise. I'm not so concerned about the music personally. I think that's great. As Ms. Reimer said, like at Brickers, it's very acceptable levels of noise. But I'm more concerned about, so neighbors were saying that inside the Legion, it gets hot, windows get open, doors get open, and then the noise coming out of the Legion is disruptive. So I'm assuming on a hot summer day, when it's really loud inside, people will pour outside onto the back patio and drink. I mean, I don't know, unless it is closed after a certain time. I'm not clear on that. But anyways, what I'm trying to say is, if the neighbors notice an uptick in noise, is there a recourse? Can this license be, can it be reviewed later on?
I think we're getting into speculative areas. We need to come up with a motion that we can actually get 3 people to vote yes on. That's where we're at right now. So as the chair, I really shouldn't be making a motion. Oh, I'm being encouraged to do that. I would be willing to amend items 1, 2, and 3 to simply say no outdoor music or entertainment. You gave hours. So is that straightforward enough for staff after all of our struggles here? Over to Mr. Jackson.
Sorry about that. Yes, that would be sufficient for staff to work with if that's the preferred motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there a seconder? I see a seconder. I'm going to call the question. All in favor? All opposed? Would you like that recorded?
Yes, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you for everybody for your patience as we struggle through this. And we're going to have to learn some more about liquor licenses in the future. So thank you very much for coming. All right, the next item on our agenda is the RFP for PEP 1. Over to staff. Sorry. Oh, right, yes, Director Bax. Right. Okay, and I will check the gallery.
You missed me?
Welcome back. Yes, we missed you. All right. Item, the PEP 1 proposal, over to staff, please, for an introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This report details a request for proposal number 2250002, which is for Planning Enhancement Project 1, also known as PEP 1. And this is the Local Government Development Approvals Grant Program Contract Award. This work will seek best practices and evaluate options to enhance SCRD planning services. Staff recommend that this report be received for information and that the grant-funded contract to provide consulting services related to PEP 1, the Local Government Approvals Grant Program, be awarded to KPMG LLP in the amount of up to $185 and $170, excluding GST, and further that the delegated authorities be authorized to execute the contract. Once the contract is executed, staff anticipate work to commence with the consultant in mid-January 2023. And staff are here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions? Do we have any motions? I see Director Lee's real hand.
Motion to accept the recommendations as presented on page 28.
And I see a seconder. Any discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? Wonderful. That passes. Thank you very much, staff. Now, next item up is 2023 Electoral Areas Grant in Aid timelines. Do we have an introduction from staff? We may not. All righty. So the report is here. Are there any questions? And if there are any questions, who's going to answer them? Over to Director Lee briefly. 1 moment. 2-minute recess. Okay, folks, welcome back to the Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of December the 15th, 2022. So we are looking at the report entitled 2023 Electoral Areas Grant and Aid Timelines, and I am looking for any questions from directors, such as Director Stamford.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question about whether or not the possibility of changing the policy would affect the timelines.
Over
Thank
to
you,
staff.
Chair. Thank you, Chair. Depending on what you're talking about and changing the policy, definitely could change the timelines. We are looking to go to advertising in February. So I'm not sure if that's answered your question.
Specifically, I'm looking at 8.2, electoral areas grant and aid, a non-approval for fire suppression and life or emergency safety equipment. This is a specific issue on the islands and other rural areas that are not supported by fire service. So if this delays or impacts the authorization of the grant and aid program, then I will look to bringing this up later in the year for the next year.
Okay, we have had this discussion before, because it certainly come up before. I don't think we have ever had a staff report as such on the question of the policy around certain policies for grant and aid. I see staff looking eager. Over to our corporate officer.
Thank you for the question. So my recollection is that we did bring something forward, and we did also receive some legal advice. There was a review a few years ago of the fire service, and this came up in the recommendations. So my understanding of why this is in the policy is because it was advised that it would be a risk to the regional district to fund fire equipment outside of our fire protection service area.
And as a follow-up, as the board, we can go against our own policy on occasion.
It's not my recommendation, but the board is free to assume the level of risk that they are comfortable with assuming.
Any follow-up questions? Director Stanford.
Given that advice, I will take that under advisement, but I also will look to later in the year, considering revisiting that policy. I think I know other regional districts do provide grant and aid for some emergency equipment, and I think we could finesse that to reduce the risk. Again, its importance, and this is one of the few areas that community groups can access monies, the much needed monies for basic service in their rural areas. So thank you.
Thank you. And I'm looking hopefully around for a motion. Director Gabius.
Well, I move to accept the recommendations as listed on page 30. Is that the right page number?
And I see a seconder.
Okay.
Is there any further discussion? I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Wonderful. And thank you so much, Ms. Crosby, for coming in at the last minute.
Sorry about my delay. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. So the next item on our agenda is, well, the next two items are the Electoral A and the Area F Advisory Planning Commission minutes. I'm going to ask if there are any questions or follow-ups to the Area A minutes. Not really seeing any. The Area F minutes do contain a recommendation, but we have not seen the matter that they refer to. So if we could perhaps defer these recommendations until the matter is under discussion at committee. What would staff suggest here? GM Hall.
Thank you for the question, Chair. So staff will address the recommendations of the APC as part of the analysis that will be included with the staff report that will be coming on this item. So unless there's anything specifically included in those recommendations that the committee would like to see emphasized or not addressed or something like that, you can leave it to staff to report back on those matters. Thanks.
I think that works just fine. Right. So Area F APC, you will not be forgotten. Okay, we seem to have reached the end of our agenda. Do we? We have no further reports. There is, I believe, no one left. Oh yes, there is one person left in the gallery. But I would look for a motion to adjourn. Moved, seconded, all in favor. Yay, we did it. Okay, we can ask for public inquiries at this point, but I'm sort of doubting there are any. Excellent. We're done. Thank you, everyone.